My new teaching job pays $700 cash, but the first rule is don't turn your back on the children. The last thing my mother said to me, before the morphine took over for good, was that I had her father's hands. Strong, capable hands. She said they could build a life for me if I just used them. A year later, I was using those hands to pawn her wedding ring for 2 months' rent and a bottle of cheap whiskey. The bottom isn't a single event. It's a slope you don't even notice until your feet are wet and the water is rising. For me, the water was at my chin when I saw the ad, tacked to a corkboard at the back of a dusty temp agency. It was printed on thick, expensive cardstock, which seemed strange next to the faded flyers for janitorial work and fruit picking. Academic proctor, Blackwood Academy. Discretion and resilience required. It listed a daily stipend that made my breath catch in my throat. Cash. Paid at the end of each day. Everyone knew Blackwood. It sat on a hill overlooking the town, an old money fortress of ivy-covered brick and manicured lawns that spat out senators and CEOs like a vending machine. My rust-eaten Ford felt like a disease in its parking lot, surrounded by silent black European cars. A woman with a hawk's nose and hair pulled into a severe bun greeted me at a vast, empty reception desk. Her nameplate read, A. Gable. She didn't ask for my resume or my name. She just looked me up and down, a flicker of something like pity in her cold eyes. "You're for the proctor position," she stated. It wasn't a question. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. This way. She led me down a corridor that smelled of lemon polish and old paper. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft click of her heels on the marble floor. We stopped before a heavy steel door, the kind you'd see on a bank vault. She tapped a long, complicated code into a keypad, and with a hiss of compressed air, it swung inward, revealing a steep flight of concrete stairs descending into darkness. She gestured down. The classroom is at the bottom. She didn't move. "You're not coming?" I asked, my voice sounding small in the big hallway. "My duties are up here." She paused, her gaze unwavering. "The instructions are on the lectern. Follow them precisely. They are for your benefit as much as for the children's." Something primal screamed at me to turn around, to get back in my dying car and drive until I ran out of gas. But then I thought of the eviction notice, the gnawing emptiness in my stomach. I thought of the cash. What exactly am I proctoring? "Their unique curriculum," she said, and her face was a perfect, unreadable mask. "Payment is in the envelope. Your day ends at 3. She stepped back. The heavy door began to swing shut, and I hurried onto the top step, not wanting to be caught by it. It closed with a final booming thud that echoed down the stairwell, followed by the churn of mechanical bolts sliding into place. I was locked in. The air grew cold and still as I descended. The walls were smooth, seamless concrete, and they seemed to drink the sound of my footsteps. At the bottom was a short hall and another door. This one was small and round, made of a dark, swirling wood that was warm to the touch, almost pulsing with a faint organic heat. To its left, a single sheet of paper was clipped to a small desk. In stark, block letters, it read, "E.T.I. Key, Safety, Protocols. The scholarship students of the Blackwood Annex are exceptionally gifted. Their continued development requires a specific environment. For their stability and your physical integrity, the following protocols are not suggestions. 1. Should the children begin to hum, you must face the class. Do not speak. Do not look away from them until the sound has ceased entirely. 2. The attendant will periodically collect a student for their scheduled treatment. When the student returns, you are forbidden from meeting their gaze for the remainder of that hour. 3. Do not attempt to touch or comfort a student returning from treatment. They will not interpret the gesture as you intend. 4. Defiance is a disruption to the learning environment. It must be corrected immediately with a single press of the red button affixed to the lectern. Do not issue warnings. 5. Your compensation is sealed in the envelope on this desk. It is not earned until the final bell. Beneath the paper was a thick, brown envelope. I lifted the flap. Inside, I saw the edges of crisp, new $100 bills. More money than I'd held in a year. My misgivings didn't vanish, but they were shoved into a corner by a more powerful, more desperate need. Just then, a soft chime echoed through the hall. The round wooden door clicked and swung open an inch. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was circular, with no windows. The walls were the same sound-dampening concrete, and the light came from flat panels in the ceiling that cast a sterile, shadowless glow. 20 small desks were arranged in a semicircle around a simple wooden lectern. The children were already filing in from another, smaller door on the opposite side of the room, taking their seats in an eerie, disciplined silence. They looked like any other group of 7 or 8-year-olds, but they were unnervingly still. They didn't fidget or whisper. They just sat, hands folded on their desks, watching me with wide, expectant eyes. A lesson plan was on the lectern. Simple arithmetic. The morning passed in a dreamlike haze. I taught. They listened. Their answers were always correct, delivered in quiet, monotone voices. Around noon, they filed out for their nutritional break. I watched them on a small monitor on the lectern. The camera showed a strange, high-walled courtyard, completely enclosed, with an artificial turf lawn and no visible sky, only more of the same flat, white light. They didn't play. They just walked in slow, concentric circles. When they returned, the energy in the room had changed. It was heavier, tenser. I was writing a long division problem on the whiteboard when it started. A low, resonant hum. It wasn't loud, but I felt it in the soles of my shoes, in my teeth. It grew steadily, a single, pure tone from 20 different sources. My hand froze, the marker hovering over the board. Rule number 1 slammed into the forefront of my mind. You must face the class. Do not look away. Every nerve ending shrieked at me to keep my back to them, to pretend I didn't hear it. But the memory of that heavy locking door pushed me. I turned, slowly, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. They were all staring at me, and their faces were gone. Where their eyes, noses, and mouths should have been, there was only smooth, uninterrupted skin, like mannequins carved from flesh. The humming seemed to emanate from their chests, a vibration that made the air feel thick as water. I felt a crushing pressure in my head, a dizziness that threatened to buckle my knees. I couldn't breathe. I could only stand there, my knuckles white on the lectern, and stare at the 20 blank, featureless ovals that were pointed directly at me. I don't know how long I stood there. It could have been 10 seconds or 10 minutes. Then, as one, the humming stopped. And in the space of a single, desperate gasp for air, their faces returned, normal. A little girl blinked. A boy scratched his nose. It was like nothing had happened. My whole body was trembling. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 2:45. The entire afternoon had vanished in that single, terrifying moment. A girl in the front row raised her hand. Her hair was the color of straw, and her eyes were a piercing, intelligent blue. "Yes?" I croaked, my voice a stranger's. "Mr. Hale," she said, her voice clear as a bell. "My mother says it's rude to stare." The blood drained from my face. I hadn't given them my name. It wasn't in the lesson plan. It wasn't anywhere. Before I could answer, the final chime rang, soft and melodic. Instantly, the children stood, their chairs making no sound on the floor. They formed a neat line and filed out of their door, not one of them giving me a backward glance. I was alone. The silence they left behind was louder than the humming had been. I snatched the envelope from the desk, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip it. I fled. Up the stairs, each step an eternity, expecting the door at the top to be locked forever. But it opened with another hiss, and I stumbled out into the polished, silent hallway. Mrs. Gable was at her desk. She looked up, and for the first time, her expression changed. It was surprise. "You're back," she said, her voice flat. I just nodded, unable to speak, and walked past her, out into the late afternoon sun. The warmth on my skin felt like a miracle. I didn't stop walking until I was at my car, fumbling for the keys, the wad of cash, a heavy, solid lump in my pocket. Before I got in, I looked back at the grand, imposing facade of Blackwood Academy. and my heart stopped. High up on the third floor, perfectly aligned with the main entrance I had just exited, was a single, round window made of dark, swirling wood. The window to the basement classroom I had just left. An impossible architectural lie. A breeze rustled the leaves in the ancient oak trees lining the drive. For a second, it sounded just like a hum. I drove straight to the liquor store. But as I sit here now, with a half-empty bottle and $800 on my table, all I can think about is the look in that woman's eyes. She wasn't surprised I had survived. She was surprised I had come back up the stairs. The rent is due tomorrow, and I know, with a certainty that terrifies me more than any blank-faced child, that I will be going back